Yeah, so that we just got through that and the wildfires that followed it, and then we had this terrible series of storms. We're still in it, actually. There's another two waves of heavy precipitation that are coming through the Vancouver area and going into the interior. So we're all on edge because the one from 2 weeks ago was very, very destructive. It dropped record amounts of rainfall in a very short period of time, in about 36 hours, and setting records at many meteorological stations all through southern British Columbia. And the land, given the mountainous landscape we live in, the runoff into the streams and rivers was extraordinary. And many of our highways and rail lines follow valley bottoms. And so these rivers, when they reached these flood stages, began to erode into the valley walls, and where the roads were. And they just basically, in many places, just removed the highways from the landscape. It's like, I don't know, Courtney, if you've ever been up Highway 8, it goes from Spence's Bridge to Merritt. It's a connector highway that goes up the Nicola River from Highway 1 over to Merritt, to the east. And it's not a big highway. It's a 2-lane highway, but there are stretches of that highway that are hundreds of meters long, if not kilometers long, that don't exist anymore. They're just not there because the Nicola River reached such a high level that it basically trimmed off the valley walls. It eroded the valley walls. And this is something I don't think the engineers who build these highways think about. They think of rivers as rising up and flooding over onto a floodplain, but they don't think about the possibility that a river can actually increase the width of its valley in a flood. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it's hard to imagine the amount of water that was going down those rivers. It's probably a record, I think, for British Columbia in terms of runoff. And so that was bad. And then we also had many culverts that couldn't carry the water. You know how they put culverts in beneath roads to carry normal flow. But if you have these very high flows, those culverts either can't carry the water or they get plugged with debris. Commonly, they'll get plugged with tree stems and boulders and things like that. And then the water pools up behind the culvert and overtops the road and then erodes the roadbed. These roadbeds aren't meant to be to transmit water. They're not designed for that. So when you get flow across a road, it very easily can begin to cut through the pavement and then begin to erode the fill that's been put in place to build the road on. So I think we need to really look again at how we construct highways, basically in BC. Even now, access to the rest of Canada by our highway system is limited. Many of the highways are totally out of commission. So this is having an economic impact because Vancouver is really the key port for transmitting goods from Asia to the rest of the country. Automobiles going to Ontario, to other provinces in Canada. It's also the way that most agricultural products reach Vancouver, by the rail system. And the longer, that is disrupted, the greater the secondary economic damage. So from my point of view, this is a terribly tragic event, but it's also very educational, in terms of the cascading effects of rainfall, how it can trigger landslides, how it can disrupt economies. And I know Europe has these problems too. You get big floods in Northern Europe. I don't know about Moldova, but they get big floods in Europe. As a matter of fact, there was a huge flood, as you know, Courtney, in Western Germany last July. It was
in the south of it was Germany, the south of the Netherlands and Belgium. It was very devastating.
And part of the problem was landslides. The road systems were not only severed by runoff, but they were also blocked by landslides. So we had a lot of debris flows, and one, unfortunately, was a fatal landslide along one of our highways that claimed 6 lives. And a typical debris flow, in British Columbia, in heavy rains, we get a lot of rainfall triggered debris flows where you get typically on a steep slope, a small amount of soil material will fail. And then because the ground is so saturated, it begins to flow down a channel and gains momentum. It actually increases in volume and begins to become a beast as it moves down the slope. And a lot of our highways cross these paths, these debris flow paths. So that puts an extra hazard on them.